I don't think you should use Markdown as a content storage format. I hate to find it in the database. You get this string of Markdown, you have React, you have two choices. You use like the dangerously set inner HTML thing, which means you have to convert Markdown to HTML first, and then, or you convert Markdown into this abstract syntax tree thing, which has been some amazing engineering, but it's still brittle and it's overhead. That's the problem with Markdown. You're making this soup where like just reusable content and presentation is just like melded together.
Yeah.
But if you use like product text or something, you can put them aside. Then you can choose like, hey, in this context, I actually want those properties to be taken account for. But in this native app, I can just ignore it.
Hello, Internet. Welcome back to the Code and Content Podcast, the podcast for conversations at the intersection of code and content. Today's episode is with Knut. While I was in San Francisco, I caught up with a few Sanity team members there in the office, and Knut wrote the book, quite literally, about what he doesn't like about Markdown. He's got this exhaustive blog post that I'll make sure is linked to in the show notes that you really should check out for perhaps a more nuanced take on where Markdown is suitable and where it absolutely is not. It's the favorite syntax for content among developers and potentially the least favorite for everybody else. And so I think it's a discussion worth having. Should you inflict Markdown syntax on your content authors, and where is it suitable for you as a developer to just keep using Markdown like you already do? If you haven't checked it out already, Sanity just launched the biggest slate of product releases we ever have. You have to go to sanity.io and check it all out. Unfortunately, my face is all over everything, but you'll hear from myself and Evelina and Simon and Magnus and more. We've got so many features we've rolled out. We have the full content operating system. We have a new brand. We have funding. We've got everything. I think we saved all of the news for one day yesterday. It's huge. Go and check that out. Until then, have a listen to this episode. Knut, welcome to the Code and Content Podcast.
Thank you.
You hate Markdown.
Yes.
Explain that.
Ooh, we're
In the broad strokes.
in the broad strokes. I can try and start with a headline. I don't think you should use Markdown as a content storage format.
Okay. So that's the nuanced take.
I hate to find it in a database.
Okay. So storing in a database is no good.
Uh-huh.
Are there any instances where Markdown does make sense?
All right. How many hours do we have?
Very few, but this is the interesting part, is that you are on record for quite some time as not liking Markdown, and yet I feel like in 2025, Markdown's never been more prevalent, particularly with AI tools.
Yeah.
Now, like every doc site has copy to Markdown, and Markdown is just everywhere. So if we have a nuanced take on why Markdown's bad in some instances, I guess we need to drill down into why it's bad in some instances.
Yeah. So maybe I should start with why am I talking about this? What beef do I have with Markdown and why? So I guess you invited me here because I wrote a 6,000 article, 6,000 word article for Smashing Magazine about Markdown and how you shouldn't be using it really. And that was before the big AI boom. And we can go back to that. But
It's pretty popular, but not massive at the time.
yeah, and it was from this perspective of someone who has been really deep into Markdown. Like in my past life in academia, I had this whole setup. Simeon, I used Sublime Text. Remember Sublime Text?
I do remember Sublime Text well enough.
I was writing in multi-Markdown, which is
Not familiar with that.
which is one of the Markdowns because there are so many Markdowns. And so I was writing academic papers with multi-Markdown. I had this whole thing where I had like a bibtesh reference application that I can like make references in Markdown, and then everything would be turned into LaTeX, which is like this super academic typography syntax,
Right.
using something called Pandoc. And that would generate a PDF with like the typeset academic like paper
Right.
in real time.
Right.
So it was a whole like Rube Goldberg academic writing machine that worked great for 2 weeks. And I was like the sysadmin of this pipeline, but like it was like fun and nerdy and like when it worked, right? So like I've been deep. Like my first code repository in GitHub was a Markdown footnote plugin for WordPress.
Right.
Using jQuery.
Okay.
So
Like you had the most complicated origin story with Markdown.
yeah, but like so it's not coming from a place on like, oh, what's this? Like I don't like this thing. It's coming from a place where I was like using a lot of that. And then I started to work with other people's websites. And in like an agency that was very focused on content first design workflows. So like think about like what are you trying to achieve, blah blah, like what is the content, and then make the design around this. And having to kind of like do that with a lot of like legacy CMSs and so on. And my job often became like, hey, we have these blobs of HTML or Markdown or something, and then we're gonna wrangle out the reusable content out of them and like put them into a structure. And I spent so much time on tackling edge cases, and they're just like wasting clients' money because of this format.
Just trying to pass a string into some sort of dynamic result.
And this was in the age where we started to use React and like component-based design libraries and so on. And it was like a really like old world meets new world kind of situation. And then I started to kind of see like, this might not be the best thing. And I was also working with content teams, and they had to kind of like learn this like syntax, and like Markdown syntax isn't that hard to learn. It's designed to be easy, but to accommodate all of the new requirements for how modern web content with embeds and iframes and blah blah, they had to kind of like either use like someone's like tag system, bespoke tag system, and be like precise, or else it would break. Or they had to kind of like paste in HTML.
Yeah.
And then you have like Markdown and HTML.
So you were inflicting Markdown on end users that weren't developers.
Yeah. And what's important to kind of like think about is like why did Markdown become a thing in the first place? And this is back in the early 2000s, where John Gruber, who is like this fairly famous blogger or journalist, I guess, in the Apple world, he has been blogging about Apple on Fireball, Daring Fireball for over 20 years.
Enthusiast Press.
Yeah, and then so he and the legendary Aaron Swartz, I hope I didn't blank on his name.
Aaron Schwartz?
Yeah.
I think I scanned your blog post again the other day, and I think that was the name I saw.
So they made kind of like, they formalized this simplified syntax for generating HTML. So he wanted a way to author HTML that was easy to read and easy to write. And it was mostly to do rich text formatting. And for everything else, John Gruber has been like, no, like if you need to do other stuff, HTML.
Yeah, right.
And he has been like very strict. Like he didn't want to make like a standard and blah blah. There has been like controversy. He even has like a license that says that you aren't really allowed to use Markdown and so on without permission, which like no one remembers anymore.
Doesn't he sort of say that there is no like flavors of Markdown? Like Markdown is Markdown and everything else is not Markdown.
Yeah. And like we don't have to care about what John Gruber thinks, but like so it's interesting that is where it comes from. So he wouldn't like add extensions to it or whatever. And,
right.
And the standard has like its flaws and so on. So there was like this major effort later from Jeff Atwood, who is famous for Stack Overflow and
I think I'm picturing his avatar in my mind
now.
Yeah. Discord as well?
Discord.
Not Discord.
Yeah, I confuse those two all the time. And they tried to make something they called standard Markdown, which invoked the ire of John Gruber.
Yeah, I think that's the comment I saw. That there's no such thing.
And they say like, oh, this is common mark. The common mark is what the GitHub flavored Markdown is derived from. And you can see like, oh, we have like it's like the XKCD comic like about standard.
Yeah.
We have like so many
cascading
variations of Markdown. So we talk about Markdown, like which Markdown are we talking about?
And these are all, like all the names of people you've mentioned, they're all developers. So they're all people who are comfortable seeing symbols alongside texts, which is only developers and nobody else.
I would think so, yes. Maybe technical writers as well, but they seem to be into XML and data and stuff. So like,
see, before, like just a brief bit of my experience. Yeah, before I was using WordPress, I was using Text Pattern, which used text style. I'm not sure if you ever saw that one.
Yeah, that's
very similar to Markdown. And yeah, like just trying to convince somebody, no, you just need to put an asterisk on either side of this word, then it'll be bold. Like even that's the simplest thing you can know, and that was way too much to ask.
And even that example, like the way like Markdown has been implemented, like is different. So forever Slack, like in the Slack message, like did this differently than like I think it was like
it should be 2 asterisks, shouldn't it? Not one.
So there's been like a lot of diversion, and Markdown is very commonly talked about by developers as, oh, this is a portable format and so on, which is like, yeah, it's plain text, so it's like easy to take plain text from one place to the other. But what they forget about is that what's in that plain text file is something that's not necessarily portable. It's very bespoke. It's very brittle because you type in the syntax. So you have to do all sorts of like shenanigans to get that into something that's usable. So you get this string of Markdown. If you have React, you have 2 choices. You use like the dangerously set inner HTML thing, which means you have to convert Markdown to HTML first, and then, or you convert Markdown into this abstract syntax tree thing. Which has been some amazing engineering, but it's still brittle, and it's overhead.
Yeah.
What if you?
It's relying on a lot of regexing and this sort of things.
Yeah. What if you just get like structured content in a JSON format or whatever it's called, and then just pop that into the right places at the outset, without that detour of this Markdown.
And so this long arc of like all the reasons that make Markdown terrible, we arrive at portable text, right? That's the solution, or are there more steps we should be considering before we jump straight to the end there?
So I think there are some sides to this. Like, what are we trying to do? We are trying to give developers a great experience, something that's like malleable and that kind of like goes well with how we build digital experiences today, either on the web or in an app or whatever. And then we're trying to give people who are working with content a great experience and removing cognitive overhead for them. So that might be like a block content editor or rich text editor, right? And then we also want something in like that makes it easy for us to move this content or to refactor or like migrate it into what we need when the world changes. So those three aspects, and then you have to ask yourself like, what is the best format for that?
Because all that data has to be saved in some sort of structure. But I feel like, I don't know if you agree with this, but I feel like the authoring experience is a big blind spot for a lot of developers. And so this is why a lot of developers will run straight to Markdown because it makes sense to them. But it makes sense to very few people outside of that. But then sort of rich text editors are such a nervy subject as well, or they are just like being... they're an interface for editing HTML in a lot of instances as well, like classic TinyMCD and all of those editors as well. So having a great authoring experience that also writes to a great data structure has been sort of the holy grail, right? And that's what portable text and the portable text editor are designed to solve.
Yeah, and you have a great episode about this with Christian, right? And as you talk about like building a great rich text or block content editor is really hard, especially in the web platform.
And one that you can make your own, because like there are great writing apps that are just writing apps, but then the data's locked down or it's in its own bespoke, undocumented structure.
Yeah. But if you look under the hood of these, like there are like now emerging different like editors that you can use in your project, portable text editor being one of them, TipTap, Lexical, and so on. If you look under the hood of those, they are using a JSON-based format to keep track of all the nodes and spans and whatnot. And then they might like spit out, like give you the opportunity to spit out HTML or just like the JSON format.
Yeah.
If you look at things like Notion, which is like famous for its block content editor, they chose a JSON-based format. It could have been portable text.
Yeah.
But yeah. So people are working a lot with these problems. They opt in for like a JSON-based thing, and it makes a lot of sense, I think.
Yeah. But I don't think anybody seems to have approached every angle like I think Sanity is attempting to, have they? So we're having the editor, having the serializer, so you can render that block content into anything, having a standard that's open, and that's all so that somebody else could adopt it. Like say, Notion could have used portable text. Like there's plenty of other organizations that could use portable text as a standard, and it's probably the most comprehensive set of tools for authoring, rendering, querying with Grok, I suppose, like and standardized like the documentation, the standard. Like I feel like we've sort of covered every aspect of how to do this.
Yeah, I think there's like the full end-to-end story here. Yeah, for sure. Like a little bit self-serving maybe, but hey, like these are problems we are obsessing about, right?
Yeah.
But yeah, and then are we arriving at the like Markdown redemption?
We could try. If Markdown has redeeming features, I'd love to hear them.
Yeah, because I think there's something to be said about authoring in Markdown. If you're comfortable with kind of like the syntax thing, it might like it can be really nice for you as like a writer, as like don't have to kind of like find the toolbar and blah blah blah, but like just quickly insert these like shortcuts and then get the formatting. So I think as like as an authoring format that get translated into this good data, that's like the future of Markdown.
Okay.
Yeah, it's getting like an established pattern that most kind of like Notion, Slack, like all of these will kind of allow you to do this stuff and get what you need, like the bang symbol for headings and so on. So I think that is definitely a good pattern, but you don't need to store it in Markdown to do that, right?
I am glad that now we have AI tooling, it can autocomplete things like the link syntax in Markdown, because I can never remember, is it the square brackets, is it the circle brackets afterwards, the order of that, where thankfully I don't have to think about that anymore, which is great.
Yeah.
And it's also worth noting too, we do have a Markdown plugin for Sanity Studio as well. Like people can actually write in Markdown, and I felt so betrayed the first time I looked it up and found we actually make that plugin. I thought we must have let somebody else do that on our behalf. But if you want to write in Markdown, you can still do that too. Is there anything else as sort of a tangent to all of this? Is there any other parts of, I suppose, the content authoring experience that you think are a blind spot? Like, so to my mind, authoring content in general is a bit of a blind spot for developers who overly think about how they would do things. Do you think there's anything else of the content creation experience where authors need to be more considered?
Like, it's tempting to say yes.
I don't know if any particular examples come to mind.
I guess like the backside or like the danger of adopting structured content, where you kind of want like the database like model behind the scenes for content. What often happens is that ends up in a bunch of fields for who have ever worked with content. So like take Sanity Studio. You can go kind of like wild and like do all sorts of like cool, complex content models that gives a lot of flexibility and opportunity in how that content is rendered. But the trade-off is that the editor opens the studio and there's like just a million fields, more or less well documented, and like it's not fun, right? Unless you're into that kind of stuff,
or it's fun editing existing content, but it's horrible to like open up a fresh document. And you've got 100 fields before you can get anything started.
So I haven't seen a lot of people tackling that problem. Again, outside of what we do with Canvas, using AI to automatically map something that's unstructured, something just like a draft with some hints in it of what things are, and then like mapping that into those data model, which is also possible because of something like portable text under the hood.
Mm-hmm.
But that is something to think about as a developer, like what is the implications of what I'm doing for what we call a content lifecycle.
Yeah.
So like that's every step of what content is involved in. Weird way to say it, but like creation, drafting, kind of like formalizing it into structured content, analyzing how it is used within your content universe, how it's used by your kind of like customers, how you iterate on it, how you evolve it, and how you eventually maybe even remove it. So all of those parts is something that I think developers should start kind of like thinking about, and those are engineering problems, and often fun problems to tackle. And if you tackle them, they often have like big implications in the positive for your business. So yeah.
Yeah, the thing with like you were saying earlier about like hundreds of fields, I think the most common example I see of that is like when people are building page builders or configurators.
Yeah.
And so the author asks the developer, hey, can I change the color or can I change the padding or and so you start creating padding control fields, and then you need mobile, tablet and desktop padding control fields, and you end up with a content model where essentially your CMS, Sanity Studio, becomes just an interface to edit a database of values, and that can be a real nightmare instead of just creating a surface where content can be created. And the content lifecycle one, I think, is a good point that we're going to discuss more in the future, that, it's not just a matter of writing content and pressing publish, and that's the end of the story, that content is much longer lived before it arrives in the CMS, and it should have a lifecycle of evidence after the fact. So I think those are really important things, and sort of elevate the conversation beyond just setting up a CMS for a website, which is very easy. Like myself, get tunnel vision on, I just need a CMS, I just need a website. There, give it to the author, leave me alone. I don't want to hear about it again. So
yeah, and to your point, like what you will always find yourself in is like some kind of tension between wanting to have a structure, because from structure there like comes flexibility in a way, and having flexibility. Kind of like having, like, as you say, like, oh, we want this landing page, but for this one, we want this kind of padding, or we want shadows on the boxes. And then, like, it's super easy to add those as, like, configurable fields, as you say.
Yeah.
But this is like, the definition of technical debt.
Yeah.
Right?
And that's putting those fields forever. You don't know what documents have they been used in.
And then it's brittle, because maybe you have a design team who have opinions about padding
should be, yes.
So there's like, it's one of those things where you sense, there might be a perfect way to approach this. There are like endless threads on social media about what to do and so on. But I think this is like this internal kind of like struggle, and you have to just navigate it.
Yeah. It's funny, this is starting to make you think these are problems at separate ends. So if you were just authoring all your content in Markdown, you would have to let the front end make all those design decisions for you, because you can't store that data in there. But as soon as you then move to structured content and structured data, well, now anything's possible. Nothing's forbidden. I can create as many fields and as much rich, deep data structure as I like. But then that becomes its own problem. So to find that happy medium where you are structuring content as data, but it still doesn't have presentational concerns baked into the content model, I guess that's the happy medium right there in the middle.
Yeah, and I think, well, like, if like sometimes you have to bake those presentational concerns into it, because presentation can also be content in a way, but you can do it in a way where it's easy to get rid of it, or just like ignore it when you need to, right?
Yeah.
So like, that's the problem with Markdown. You're making this soup where like just reusable content and presentation is just like melded together.
Yeah.
But if you use like portable text or something, you can put them aside. So like, then you can choose like, hey, in this context, I actually want those properties to be taken account for. But in this native app, I can just ignore it. Like, I don't have to care about it, right?
Yeah, that's right. You can make all sorts of decisions once you've got it in portable text. Like, does this block actually render or not? And is it just a presentation? Is it just an image, or is it a completely custom widget of its own? Like, so in Sanity Learn, one of the blocks is like a checkbox to mark a task as done, and that's just, it's a custom bullet point, I think, in portable text. And on the front end, it renders a complete HTML form that triggers an API request. And so to take something that it's not even really content in the back end, but it is rendered into something really rich and interactive on the front end. That's what you can do once you've got portable text. Instead of having to write some specific character in a Markdown file that's going to turn into that.
Or even worse, and I'm going to say it, like MDX, where you actually write not HTML, but like you write JSX components.
See, now maybe that one is too spicy, because MDX is like the one thing I do like about Markdown is, but then again, that's only for technical blogs, right? Like, I would like to just dump one-off bespoke React components into a blog post. Like,
this is like one of those, like, you can hate the game, not the player kind of things, because, like, again, there's so much impressive engineering and thinking behind Markdown tooling and MDX and so on.
Mm-hmm.
But, like, as someone who does a lot of technical writing and documentation and sometimes want to make a pull request for some documentation side, having to figure out what are the MDX components that I'm supposed to use in this documentation site. And how now I have to install the whole website and spin it up. It might be like thousands of pages. I have to wait 20 minutes for it build to see if my small contribution to the spelling error actually makes sense or whatever it is. Not a great experience even for me as a developer who can do this. So I'm like a little bit like, like, but then again, maybe there aren't a lot of good alternatives to that workflow, right? So,
I mean, this come back to like something, and perhaps should have, like I said it earlier, but it got some good play last year, was like the fixing a typo shouldn't require a pull request. And that came from that sort of thought about you having all of your content in GitHub seems convenient for something, but not as convenient as it seems. Although I did have an experiment last year where I took like the code block in portable text and used the MDX library under the hood to like evaluate that into a component. There's a version of that would work, I think, but it's also kind of nightmare fuel. It was so.
But are you then writing MDX, or is it just like
I was writing JSX inside of a code block and then rendering that in real time into a React component on the front.
You to kind of use the tooling in a way.
Using MDX under the hood. So because that to me is like a holy grail thing. Like, I would like to write one-off React components, but then I would like the whole of like React and TypeScript and everything, I guess, in my code block editor. So I could probably do it with AI, but I'm going to spin that up.
Yeah, and I'm glad you mentioned AI because I was looking for a segue.
It was going to come eventually.
But yeah, it always
comes back to AI.
Yeah, but like, and this is the interesting thing, is that Markdown seems to be the protocol for AI prompts. It has become that, and that's interesting to see. It makes sense because most of the models have probably seen a whole buttload of Markdown having scraped through GitHub and so on. So it's not a surprise that LLMs are quite good at understanding it. It's like also like a very simple syntax, so there's not much to understand.
It would be simpler to parse than portable text, wouldn't it?
Yeah, like
to just get to extract the meaning of the language.
I think there's like agreement that passing JSON to LLMs it works, but it's like a little bit of waste of tokens. It's a little bit too verbose.
I was in conversation just on that yesterday, like versus XML as well.
Yeah,
it seems
like
muchness.
Yeah, because like is it like LLMs likes this faux XML thing. Is it like if you put brackets, right? It's just like a way to contextualize something.
Yeah, I do like that you can just make up any syntax. Yeah, that's what that is crazy.
You just understand that this pattern means that whatever is in here is like a meta.
This is a variable, or this is a parameter or something.
So that's like a concept that it kind of knows, right? So
it's seen the 50 different flavors of Markdown and it knows all of them.
Yeah. Or it knows like how XML works. Like you have meta stuff and then you have like the stuff.
Yeah.
Well, what's interesting is that if you use something like portable text, you can render that to Markdown.
That's true.
So, and we have like libraries for it. You can render JSON to Markdown, so you can get the best of all the worlds in a way.
And it's preferable to do it that way, isn't it? Because like the portable text format is like the truest expression of that content as data. But then you can transform that into anything. Most people transform that into React components or HTML. But yeah, to then transform that into Markdown, you still get the exact same content with the same markup meaning.
Yeah.
But without having to author it in that format.
Exactly. We just implemented this for the new Sanity documentation site. On all the articles now, you can like copy as Markdown if you want to like bring that content quickly into your LLM.
Yeah.
And I think the next step here is like, so like something like portable text, which is a block content format. It means that you can have like complex modules within your like paragraphs and so on. And those are a little bit hard. Like, how should you express that in the Markdown syntax? And this is where you can, if it's for LLMs, you can use this faux XML and just say that, hey, this is like a CTA, and here's like the title and the link, and now we can understand it kind of. And you get a little more free here to kind of like mess around and see what works.
Cool.
It doesn't need to be rendered anywhere.
It sounds like you're coming around on Markdown.
I was always around. It's just like
the art time bends back towards me.
I just don't want to see it as returned in my HTTP API request.
Yeah,
I don't want to have to deal with it in my React app.
Yeah, I get that. Yeah. So yeah, I think I think the point is that it's a good format for telling an LLM something, but it's far less of a good format for authoring or rendering.
Yeah, and like for the last couple of years, even as JavaScript developers, we have been like, oh, we want types, we want like runtime validation and so on, and then you're okay with like Markdown.
Is there type-safe Markdown? Is that a thing?
Yeah, they have tried to make it happen. Like it's kind of like, I guess you get types for your YAML front matter, which is also interesting that we are doing, and then I don't think you get type safety for whatever is in the Markdown string. Right. This is where my ignorance shows a little bit, but yeah, it's like interesting where we are willing to compromise. I guess.
Yeah.
No, that's spicy.
To finish on, if we get the portable text editor like in an IDE, maybe that would turn people around, because I think it's writing Markdown where I'm writing my code is probably the number one value proposition for the developers that like writing in Markdown.
Yeah, I want, like, it's okay that you have a README MD and so on. Like the audience and the authors are developers. Like, yeah, okay, sure.
Except that GitHub warning format, I have to look that up every time I want to use that.
Yeah,
it's a one-off bespoke.
Yeah.
So anyway, there's who knows how many flavors of Markdown there'll be between recording this and publishing it. So
yeah,
it might be out of date by the time this comes out. But anyway, any other closing thoughts and anything else you want to get off your chest through? I think this has covered the majority of the Markdown and Sanity conversation.
Yeah, just think twice about imposing Markdown on people.
All right. Well, on that note, thanks for joining the Code and Content podcast.
Thanks for having me.